Good morning. My name is Susan Sakosha Olson, and I'm from the Consumer Engagement Team here at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island. I'd like to welcome you to today's seminar, Facing Tough Times, Learning Resiliency. And I think this is certainly an appropriate topic for what we're going through right now. At Blue Cross, we are committed to the health and well-being of our members and of our community. It's very important for us to provide you more ways to stay healthy and to be active and get you the information you need when you need it. Today with me is Jeff Rodriguez. Jeff is a professional health and wellness educator with over 25 years of experience. In his role with Virgin Pulse, Jeff continues to concentrate on both worksite and community programming. And Jeff's passion is dealing with people from all walks of life. So in just a moment, Jeff will start. But if you have any questions or thoughts or comments, please enter them into the chat as I will be monitoring that. If you have questions, Jeff will answer them at the end of this presentation. With that, take it away, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's great to be here talking to everyone today. And facing tough times, I would say that's probably an understatement for many of us. Certainly, everyone suffering from the pandemic or going through the pandemic is certainly an undertaking, and we are all facing tough times here. But the idea here is to remind you of those tools that you have that exist within you to stay strong and be resilient. Before we start, we'd like to just make you aware that the information contained in the materials is provided for educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice. So we always encourage that medical advice part. Nothing contained in the materials is intended to be used as for a medical diagnosis or treatment. You should always seek advice from your physician or any other qualified healthcare provider before starting any new treatment or discontinuing an existing treatment. Talk with your healthcare provider. Talk to them about any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition. So with that said, let's talk about tools to stay strong and be resilient. Let's talk firstly about what is resiliency. And resiliency, we have to understand, is the ability to adapt and rebound from a setback. You know, we hear these expressions daily, weekly, and one of the things that we have to remind ourselves is that we are all in the situation. Our situation is different, but facing tough times as it relates to a pandemic, we all suffer in many different ways. Resiliency is also the ability to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And for many of us, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. For some of us, it takes a little coaxing. It takes a little strength from within to understand that this is a temporary situation. And even if we take away the pandemic, you have to understand that there are always going to be tough times. Your life is not going to be perfect. So we really need to understand that most tough times that we suffer from are temporary setbacks, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. A behavior, thought, or action that enables a better outcome is also the idea of being resilient, having that resiliency within us. It certainly involves having a strong support system so that we know that we are not going through this situation alone. We have support, we have family, we have friends that we can trust. We have healthcare professionals. If we need to go that route, absolutely. And we can't be afraid to reach out for help. That's part of us being resilient. And we understand that we are going into situations with the support. In terms of finding enjoyment, that is important even during a tough time. So some of the things that we want to show you today are skills that actually help you improve the ability to cope with these tough times. Things that add to your resiliency. They add to the resilience. Things like communication and problem-solving skills. And it's really important to talk about the problems and keep an open mind with possible solutions when we talk about these problem-solving skills. We have to have an open mind. For things that maybe you are not accustomed to hearing about that potentially work, you have to have an open mind sometimes about things that maybe you're just not familiar with. The ability to manage feelings and impulses is an important thing. And for many of us, we do that naturally. For many of us, that comes very unnatural to us. And maybe we are very impulsive, but we can certainly get better. The ability to make plans and follow through with them is a very important thing. There needs to be follow through. Making a plan to overcome setbacks is certainly vital, but keeping in mind that the follow through part requires some discipline from us. We have to sort of reach down deep and find that discipline within us to make sure that we follow through. Certainly being positive, and we hear about the power of positivity. There's research that shows that related to our health, if we continue to stay positive about a certain outcome, it really is healthy for our brain. And certainly having the confidence and knowing that you have those strengths within to be resilient. And certainly having that supportive relationship or relationships that you can turn to people, that you can talk to people. You know, self-doubt is a very normal thing. But if you don't believe in yourself, who is going to? And certainly always remember, you can get through this, and you will. There are ways to manage stress and certainly boost your mood. But when we talk about the physical and the mental part, they go hand in hand. So let's take a look at some of the common sense tips that we want to share with you today. Firstly, we want to make sure that you're staying active and use the general rule of thumb, about 30 minutes a day for 5 days a week is what is recommended. If you go to a primary care physician for a certain problem, they are going to scrutinize your exercise habits without a doubt. And that is going to be the recommendation that's going to be made. 30 minutes, 5 days a week. It's important to find something that you really enjoy doing, that's going to hold your interest for a long time. And really, ultimately, you need to make this part of your lifestyle. It's not just a temporary thing to fit into a dress you like in the summer, or, you know, to make sure those jeans fit me a little better. You know, that's great, and that's a great incentive. But we also want to make sure that this is part of our everyday routine. And maybe not necessarily every day, but at least most of the week, 5 days a week. It's also important to stay active mentally. And this may be something that you may need to sort of think of things that really held your interest for years and years. And maybe you just have lost that interest, or you've lost that passion with things. Don't be afraid to revisit things that you've really enjoyed doing throughout your life. You know, things like podcasts. We are strong proponents of podcasts because there are so many of them. So if my passion is record collecting, there is a podcast that is specialized in people that are like-minded, that are into what I'm into. And that's really important, to really hold your interest, hold your passion. Certainly books on audio, physical books. Maybe for years you were reading books. Maybe it was mystery books that you enjoyed doing, that they enjoyed reading. Maybe it was cookbooks. I know many people, they're always looking at different recipes and how that they can incorporate their twist into things. So again, we always want you to stay mentally active. Downtime mentally usually is not a good thing. Certainly, your diet plays a big role in the way you feel. Go for those fruits, vegetables, those 100% whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy fats. Fats from nuts, fats from olives, fats from avocado. These are fats that are good for your heart, but also vital in the way that we think, keeping us grounded, maintaining sort of that straight mental health in terms of really sort of thinking clearer. Certainly getting enough sleep. And the requirement is 7 to 9. Everybody's different in terms of their requirements, but generally we tell you 7 to 9 hours a night is what's important. And it gives us that sense of clearness with a good night's sleep. When we don't get enough sleep, it affects us mentally. It affects the way that we are active or inactive. So it's very easy to get into that rut and start to chase your sleep. And maybe you're napping too often. You just don't have that energy. It's a real important thing to make sure that you have a great sleeping environment and that you are including 7 to 9 hours of sleep each day. Things that we want you to be careful of is dwelling on the negative. Now, we could speak for a good half hour on things that make us negative. Certainly, mainstream media, the news, if you are exposed to too much news, it can make you a negative person. You're going back to those exercise habits. Most research shows that after you exercise, it's very difficult to get into a negative mood. As we exercise, it tends to put us into a better mood. And research shows that happier people are those people that regularly exercise, that avoid that negativism, that avoid that negativity. And sometimes we have to be careful in terms of our social media platforms that we take a look at. Social media is wonderful, but if we overdo it, it can potentially make us negative. Sometimes just the sight of a picture, sometimes the reactions of other people that we see, and we start to get into that political world where we see a lot of different comments and thoughts and people's expressions, it really sort of can increase our negativity. Certainly who we hang with, who we are spending time with, can also increase or decrease our negativity. So we certainly don't want to be exposed to consistent negativity, but rather positivity. And that means that you do your job in terms of your exercise and your nutrition to make you feel better, to make you feel that you've got a better outlook on life. Certainly things like self-medicating can potentially be very dangerous. And it's something we never recommend. We also recommend don't feel victimized, whether it's over the pandemic, whether it's an issue you have with your child or an issue you have at your job. Feeling victimized is a very easy thing to do. I'll give you a perfect example. This always happens to me. This always happens to me. I always have this problem. We can't get into that rut thinking that way. Okay? That's negativity at its best. And we want to try to avoid that. So we want you to make sure that you're careful about these 3 important points that you see. Perspective is big. It is huge. The way I look at things, the way I perceive things to be, can have a great influence on the outcome. So certainly keeping a positive attitude, doing your best to sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel, see that silver lining is very important. Things like your job, things like divorce, things like a death in the family. These are not easy things to deal with. It's a very serious thing. It's a very life-changing thing. But sometimes we have to look at other opportunities that potentially can be involved with a change in our life. Try looking back at your most trying experiences that you got through. What events have been the most stressful? What are things that you did to deal with it in a healthy way? Who have you reached out for support? Do you have friends you can trust? Do you have family members that you can trust? Not all of us can say that, but most of us can say that we do have family members and friends, close friends, that we are comfortable talking about an issue with. And that's important, whether it's professional help, whether it's a personal friend that you've been trusting in, confiding in for years. We want to make sure that we have that support as we are facing these tough times. And then you also have to sort of go back into your memory bank and look at what you learned about yourself. For many of us, these issues here, as we're going through, really we're learning a lot about ourselves. We're learning about situations we are in and how the positive outcomes, the work that we've put in, the tools that we have in our toolbox, how that has affected us, how we use those properly, how it becomes a positive outcome. And certainly what has made me feel more hopeful about the future is many of the questions that you've got to ask yourself. Because again, there will always be tough times. So that's something that you really have to understand. Certainly building resilience is personal and it's different for everybody. But there are many things in common that build your resilience. So it's things like being flexible. We can't always be rigid. Things are not always going to go our way. The glass is half full. That's an optimistic approach. Making an action plan. And for many people, writing down things is very important. It works very well. The power of writing can be very effective for people. And there's that leaning on others advice, having that support system, having an outlet, committing to a healthy lifestyle, like we mentioned. And again, it's not just a temporary thing. In many of our nutrition programs, we tell people, their first question is, what should I do to eat healthier? And we get into all of these different things that they should be eating. And when we speak specifically to things like dinner that everybody has, we tell people standard operating procedure, commit to the healthy lifestyle of eating a lean protein and a lot of vegetables most days during the week. And that's what keeps us out of trouble. And that's just one example of committing to a healthy lifestyle. Finding your purpose. That's a great question that many of us have to ask ourselves. There are purposes. We all have a purpose in life. Don't be afraid to build yourself up. That's important. For many of us, we don't toot our horn enough. We don't give ourselves enough credit. Cultivating gratitude, being thankful for what you have, but also being grateful to people, because that comes back to you. So when you become grateful for things, it really helps you mentally. And don't be afraid to laugh out loud. Certainly staying positive. And don't be afraid to ask for help. These are some reputable sources of information that we always encourage people to take a look at. And that's where we want you to find your information, from reputable sources of information that is factually based. That's really important. It's great to have support systems, but we also want to make sure that you're guided into the correct, into the right direction in terms of where you're getting your valuable information. Take care of yourself and reach out for help. Don't be afraid to make sure that you're having a healthy support system. Because many of us, as we go through tough times, sometimes we feel like we're really alone in the situation. And that's not the case at all. Think of all of those times that you said to a personal friend, I should have asked you for help. And that person, maybe 9 out of 10 times, would say, you should have let me know. I would have been glad to help you. So really, again, that support system is something that we're going to emphasize today. The fact that it is a must. Of course, we're encouraging the exercise and we're encouraging the healthy eating as part of your regular lifestyle. But we also want to make sure that you have that support system also to get through these tough times and to stay resilient. Thank you, Susan, for having us today. You're muted, Susan.
Sorry about that.
Hey, no problem. Be flexible, right? That's what we just talked about that. To be resilient, you have to be flexible.
That was really great information. I really appreciate it. I want to give people a chance to ask some questions. So if they have questions or comments, they can write them in the chat and I'll give them to you. A couple of things that you said really hit home for me about the power of positivity and being with positive people. I think that is so important because negative people really can drag you down and make it more difficult for you to be resilient. The other thing, staying away from watching the news too much. It's great to be well informed, but if you spend too much time on it, I find that can drag me down too. So thank you so much for that great information. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I'd like to welcome everyone to join our Facebook page on Your Blue Studio Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. and at 2 p.m., where we have some wonderful exercise classes and some mind-body kind of experiences. We do meditation and yoga, Zumba, any kind of exercise. All the things you've talked about, Jeff, things that are so important. So I hope people take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, Susan. There's many things that sort of float everybody's boat in terms of, staying resilient and having those tools in our proverbial toolbox, I guess is what you could call it. So, we're also encouraging people to maybe think out of the box and maybe try new things. So you just mentioned something like yoga. That may be something really new to somebody, but it's an effective tool. So we encourage people, don't be afraid to try out these valuable resources that are offered.
Yep. Thanks again, Jeff. If people can't take the classes live, we record everything and it's always available to you on our Facebook Live page. So I want to thank you again for joining us, and everyone have a wonderful day. Thanks, Jeff.